Hello everyone, my name is Rob Biddulph and I am an author and illustrator of books that I hope some of you have enjoyed, and I just want to say hello to all the Storyland kids out there.
So hi Rob.
Hello.
It's a great pleasure to meet you here, and I'm
Likewise.
so excited. Because we also have your books in our library, and children love to read that. And I find that most of your books, like almost everyone, at least I read, are rhymed.
Yeah, rhyming, I like to write.
Why do you keep your stories rhymed?
Well, there's two reasons. One, they're the type of stories that I like reading to my children best are the ones that rhyme. I don't know. There's something about a rhyming story that I can start reading the story and then my child can finish the line off because they can you remember the words to a rhyming story. It's a bit like a song or a poem or something like that. So I really like reading rhyming stories. And the other reason that I write in rhyme is because I don't really think of myself as a writer, because in my previous job I was a designer and illustrator, but not really a writer, and so weirdly, because I write in rhyme, it sort of feels like I'm sort of hiding behind the rhyme.
Really?
So I don't feel as exposed. I think if I wrote in prose, people might actually realise that I'm not a writer. Although I should start calling myself a writer now, because I've written quite a few books. But I really like the challenge of writing in rhyme. It's good fun.
Yeah, because I have a colleague. She also writes stories, and then one day she write a poem like it's in rhyme, and she find it's actually limiting her from developing the stories.
It's very hard. It's very hard to tell. I mean, sometimes I think, why do I do this to myself? Because you know how your story has to go. You know the arc. But to get a rhyme to work, sometimes at the end of your story, you have to unpick the whole story, go back to the beginning just to get that rhyme to work. So it is hard, and lots of people. I think it's very hard to write a good rhyming story. You can write a rhyming story, but actually it not to feel too contrived or too forced. It's very hard.
Yeah, because I noticed that you also like Dr. Seuss.
I love Dr. Seuss. He's the master.
Yeah, and his books are also very
He's the one. I mean, my favourite children's text of all time is How the Grinch Stole Christmas by Dr. Seuss, which I just think is so effortless. When you read the rhyme, you sort of, in a way, you forget that it rhymes because the story works perfectly well. But then there's also this beautiful, kind of really skillful rhyming quality that he has, and it's so funny. That's the good thing about rhyme. I think there's potential for humour in rhyme as well. You know, sometimes I do little forced rhymes that are really, I've sort of had to really manipulate the text to get this rhyme, and I just think that's really funny, and the kids really enjoy that. So.
Yeah, like if you in your stories you rhyme a lot, then it affect you like in your daily conversation where you like.
Do I speak in rhyme every day? I find myself thinking in rhyme. You know, sometimes something will happen, and in everyday life, and you suddenly realise, that'd be a great word to use in the story because there's so many rhymes for it. So I get my phone out and I quickly make a note of it, that kind of thing. But I don't actually live my life in rhyme, although sometimes it feels like I am, because they take me such a long time to write the stories. You know, they take 5 minutes to read, but 6 months to write, a year sometimes to write.
Yeah.
And,
but I think you're very prolific. Like you write so many picture books and also chapter books.
Yeah, well, I haven't written any chapter books yet, although I've illustrated. I've illustrated.
Oh, illustrated.
But funny you should say that, because I've got an idea that I've just started work on. So I'm hoping that's going to happen quite soon. But yeah, I illustrate lots of other chapter books and covers for other people. But a few people have said to me they think I'm quite prolific for picture books. I do 2 picture books a year that I write and illustrate, and it doesn't feel like I'm being particularly prolific. I like it. I really, it's what I like to do. So when one's finished, I want to move on to the next one straight away.
Yeah, like talking about stories, I'm curious, like how do you develop your stories? Because in some of writing class, like teacher would say there's some structures like the hero's journey. You started with an ordinary life, and then they have some conflicts, and then the conflict is resolved, and then they live like an ordinary and happy life again.
Yes.
Or, like, do you have any magic or like a little tricks?
Do you know what? I don't really. I know. I'm aware of those kind of story structures, and there's only 7 ways or something you can tell a story, but I don't actually know what they are. But I think, for me, I think because I've got 3 children and I've read a lot of stories to my children, and also over the course of my life I've watched lots of films and read lots of books, that kind of thing. And you sort of have I think I have a natural. I know there's got to be an arc. There's got to be some kind of conflict or some kind of your hero character has to be in some sort of peril that then has to be resolved. So you're kind of aware that there has to be this kind of arc, but I don't have a plan that I follow. I don't sort of I don't have boxes that I have to tick really. I just
sort of like come in natural.
Yeah, I mean every story, my picture book stories, they just start as one line ideas, like a sentence idea. Bear loses ground, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I love that story.
Yeah. And then over the course of sketching, well, you saw my talk yesterday, so lots of sketching and then lots of kind of thinking about character. And while I'm doing that, while I'm drawing, the story sort of gets a bit fleshed out, and then you start adding little bits of detail, and then there's always a moment with me where the penny drops and I sort of realise, oh, that's what happens in the story, that's where the story is taking me, and then and that's always a really nice moment when it happens. Touch wood, that keeps on happening. But no, I don't really follow a model as such, but I think now I'm sort of on a roll with the picture books. I think I know what I'm doing in terms of the story. So the hard thing is to try and condense it into such a small amount of pages. 24, 26 pages. It's quite hard to get everything across in such a short kind of amount of space. So that's where the pictures do a lot of the job for you. So your words and your pictures don't necessarily do exactly the same thing. Sometimes the picture can do a lot of the job for me without me having to actually write it. So.
Yeah, just like silent books, they don't even have words.
No, exactly. Yeah. I've actually got a silent book idea actually, so I'm quite interested to maybe see how that goes.
Yeah, they have like a silent book corner over there.
Oh, do they? Oh, I have to have a look. I have to go and explore that with daughters. Yeah, maybe some ideas that I can borrow. And just now you mentioned that you read stories to your daughters. Yeah. So now, like after you created your own story, will you read the story to them? I always read them. Yeah.
Before they get published.
I mean, quite early on in the. In fact, I will talk to my daughters and my wife about the writing idea stage, and then. If I've had a good day, sometimes for me, a good day is if I can write maybe 2 lines or 4 lines of a story. That's a really good day. Yeah. And I will always go in and sort of say, well, what do you think? This, and but I don't know if it's the trouble with children, but the facts of the matter are they're really honest. Yeah. but do you know what? That's really good. So if they say, no, that's rubbish, or that doesn't work, or I don't like that character, or this book's boring, then I kind of think,
So, like, will you create some stories for or some character for your daughter? Like, some specific characters for them?
Well, I have done in the past. I mean, the first few stories that I wrote, the very first story that I wrote was I mentioned it in my talk yesterday, but it was about a doll called Nothing, and that was a real thing that happened to my daughter. So in that story, I did have 2 of my daughters that actually appeared in the story. And in Kevin, if you look on the back, the final page of Kevin, there's a playground scene with lots of children playing with imaginary friends in the playground, and all 3 of my daughters are actually in that scene, sort of hidden away. But I did. I mean, they're sort of, in a weird way, they're in all of my books, in some form or another, because I think I use my experience as a parent to kind of help me tell those stories. So there's elements of my kids in all of my books, really.
Yeah. Like you mentioned yesterday, your daughter gave you a lot of like inspiration.
Lots of ideas, yeah. Kevin, again, that was her real imaginary friend. It's the same daughter actually. It's Kitty, my middle daughter. She seems to be the one. She's 13 now, but when she was younger, she had lots of crazy things going on in her mind, and I was like, right, I need that. Write it down. Yeah, they are amazing.
I really think that most authors a lot of authors get inspired after they have children.
Yes. Yeah, it's fun. I mean, equally, there's lots of authors that don't have kids, and they produce these amazing books with real insight into how kids' minds work. And I think, How do you do that?
Yeah, I'm curious. Like, I was about to ask you, like, did you learn something about children's psychology, or like, how did you know children so well?
No, I didn't study children's psychology or anything, but I just think it's the fact that I've got 3 girls. And one thing I always say, which is quite strange, is that the fact that we had, when my daughters have their birthday parties, they often will invite lots of their friends to our house, and my wife and I will have to sort of entertain them when they're little, and we have games and we do things, we do drawing and all that kind of thing. And I think it's really helped me having to talk to big groups of children like that, and lots of different children. You sort of get to know how to talk to children. And in my books, I don't really like to talk down to children. I like to talk to them as almost like they're adults, because they're not stupid. They might not have as big a vocabulary as you and I have, but they're not stupid. So I'd never talk down to children. It's really helped me when I go out and meet kids at schools and do my live events. People say that I'm quite natural with the kids, and I'm sure that's just because...
Is that because your inner kid is...
I'm a big kid. I mean, that is a big part of it. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I draw penguins for my job.
Oh yeah, it's very lovely, the penguins. Yeah. And how did you come up with the penguin shape? I mean,
the design.
Design, yes. Like, because nowadays there are a lot of illustrators, a lot of great work. Like, especially you mentioned that you read a lot of others' great works.
Yeah.
So how to remain originate, like when you are creating?
Yeah, it's difficult. I think that's the most difficult thing for an illustrator, to be original, to be different, to have your own individual style. It's really, really hard to find that. That's the holy grail. That's what everyone at this book fair is looking for. And because there's so many great books out there, it's really, really hard to have your style which is kind of unique. And I'm sure there's lots of, subconsciously I've borrowed from lots of people that I've liked. But it's the only way to develop your own style is just by drawing. And the way and you sort of stumble upon a style. And because I worked in magazines before, I used to do quite a lot of illustrations for lots of different magazines, and I would always change my style to suit that magazine. So in a way, I didn't really have a style of my own. I would have all these different styles. And then when I started doing the picture books, it was my agent, Jodie. She said, right, you need to draw a portfolio of children's books. Staples us. We sold them yesterday. But it was in the process of doing that my style came into focus. And once you've got the style, it's quite easy to sort of turn that to any aspect. But it's constantly evolving. The book that I just finished, which is going to be published in the UK in the summer, is called Show and Tell, and it's quite an evolution in my style. It's much more sort of painterly and sketchy than the previous book. So for me, it's something that's constantly kind of evolving. I'm never really happy with anything I've done. That's a big trait.
You're very strict with yourself.
I am very strict with myself, and I really don't. Whenever I finish a book, I don't like it. It's quite by that time.
So your best is always the next one.
Yeah, I'm always. By then, I've moved on to the next one, and then maybe a year or so later, I'll look back at the book and think, actually, I like that. That's really good. I really like that. But in the moment, I never. And I've always been like it. From when my mum said I was like it when I was a little boy. I did a drawing, and then I just didn't like it, and then a bit later on, I sort of come back to it. But I think that's a good trait, because it means you're always pushing yourself to kind of get better and improve. So.
So how would you have you had any moment that you have the so-called illustrators, the bottleneck, or
the block, like a writer's block?
Yeah.
I again, touch wood, no, I haven't actually. Okay. I think because it took me quite a long time to get published. I mean, it was 4 or 5 years, I think, to get published. In the course of that time, I've sort of built up a lot of ideas for books, and most of them are like, as I said, just that one sentence, but actually there's potential in the idea. So I always carry my phone with me, and whenever the idea comes, I quickly make a note of it before I forget it, because I always forget my ideas very quickly. But I've got this big Google Doc with like loads and loads, like hundreds of ideas, and 90% of them probably won't be any good, but that 10% of them, I've got quite a nice kind of backlog of good ideas. And I go to meet my publisher at HarperCollins once a year, and I would look through my list, and I'll sort of work on maybe 7 or 8 of them, and sort of just write them up into paragraphs, not in any great detail, and then I'll sort of pitch them to HarperCollins, and they'll say, right, I think these 2 or these 3 should be your next book. or they should be ones you're thinking about in more detail. So I have a plan in my head for the next year or two usually. So yeah, I don't want to get to the point where I finish a book and I'm like, oh no, I don't know what I'm going to do next. I'm one of those people that I like to know what I'm going to be doing for the next year or two. So so far, no, I haven't had a writer's block.
Yeah, it's good to hear that.
Yeah.
It's inspiring to know that you have this process. Actually, you have ideas and then you pitch and then you.
It's a team effort. I mean, it really is. You know, they will certainly be involved from the very first moment to some degree. I mean, usually it is like I really like a bear with no growl. That's a really good idea. I want to work that up a bit more, and then it's over to me, and I go away and I'll sort of work out the story arc and the characters. Then I will write the story and do a first draft, and then come back here, and then they will tweak things and tweak bits of the design and the layout maybe, or character design or colour palettes, that kind of thing. Sort of have discussions. But I'm quite unusual in the picture book world in that because I've got a magazine design, I've got a design background really. I actually I do all the design of the book too, so I put everything together on the page, which is quite unusual. Most illustrators will do the illustrations, then hand it over to their publisher to actually put it on the page, but because that's my background, I really enjoy that part of the process. It's almost one of my favourite parts of the process. Once the illustrations are done, actually working out the layout and the design is a really fun part for me. So
thank you. And I think like most kids when they were young, they love drawing, and then they're young artists. But when they grow up, probably it's because they have a lot of school work, homework, school heavy school load, or their parents don't encourage them to do so, and then they give up. So I was curious to know, like, how did you start it from, because you liked drawing when you were young, and then how did you keep on doing this, and did your parents help you, or? Well,
my mum's an artist. My mum paints, and she's amazing. She's really, really good. So I was very lucky in that I grew up in quite a creative household. So yeah, I was always encouraged. My dad isn't at all artistic, so not so much from my dad's side, but my mum really encouraged it. And my brother is he's an art director on the Times, on the Times newspaper as well. So he's gone into the same sort of career as me. And my sister's very good at music actually. She's a really amazing musician. So we're all quite kind of creative, and that's because really of my mum, I think, and it was encouraged. Teachers at my school said I was quite good at drawing from a very young age, so it was always my thing. I was always the kid at school who did the drawing, and so for as long as I can remember, it was always what I wanted to do with my life, because it was the thing that I loved doing and apparently was quite good at. And my mum she encouraged me. I went off to art, went to university, because I was quite academic as well. I was quite good at writing. I did maths.
I read that you got an A level.
A level in maths. I know, how bizarre.
Yeah, because a lot of artists, they are not good at maths.
No, but I quite liked the math side of things. But again, I think that's come in handy when I'm designing the books. There's lots of mathematical elements in illustration too. Grids and that kind of thing. So I think it's helped sort of the way that I think. But I was quite academic, but I wasn't. Yeah, I mean, some of the teachers at school tried to sort of steer me away from the art side of things, and that makes me feel really sad when I hear that happens, because I don't know why the creative and visual mediums are not valued as highly as sciences and that kind of thing, because it's we need it. We need that kind of creative visual enrichment.
Yeah, sure.
I mean,
but how to say that?
Tips
for creators, for young authors.
For young authors. Well, my tips would be, if you're an illustrator, my big tip is to just keep on drawing, keep a sketchbook and draw. As I said earlier, it's only through drawing that I actually managed to hone my style. In terms of writing, in terms of being published, it's difficult and it's competitive, but you basically hang in there, don't give up. For me it took 4 or 5 years, and it was very up and down. I had good days and I had bad days, and there were times when I thought it was never going to happen, But I had enough encouragement, and I had enough people tell me that it was something that I could do, that I sort of hung in there. And also just listen to people, the advice that people give you, particularly people in the publishing industry, because they know what they're doing. And I know it can be difficult sometimes to be told that you're not doing something the way that they think you should be doing it. But usually they're right. So but I would say go for it. Go for it. Lots of people tell me I would like to write a children's book, or I've got an idea for a children's book, but very few people actually sit down and write it. So my advice would be, do it. Actually do it. Get something down on paper. Doesn't have to be perfect the first time, but get it down on paper and show it to somebody else early on. Because that is the scary bit, when you actually create something, and then you show it to somebody else. It's really scary, but the sooner you do it, the more likely it is to happen for you. So yeah.